Contemporary Context Presentation Assignment number 6, Video Part 2. Now, this assignment was absolutely perfect for me because this was now the time that I needed to channel my work, refine my work, simplify my work, and actually prove as one of the learning outcomes that I could actually follow the journey with the aid of the methodical cycle to actually produce a presentation and a collection. So what I did here with the sketchbook was I returned back to the works of construction, still with the contextual elements of the Paul Smith coat, which gave me the idea of construction, and the ideas of the concrete support walls here in Kidderminster, which had been designed by William Mitchell. Now, I'd still maintained doing some in-depth research. As we can see here, I'd started to collate areas which related to the William Mitchell inspiration, and here the construction and the colour palettes of the Paul Smith coat. Now, the sketchbook follows a journey of the combinations of ideas with colour palette and concrete, with stitch work for construction. Now, I will show towards the end of this presentation the final outcomes for the samples, but the samples did become very three-dimensional in structure, and as we can see, the photographic evidence is very, very important. And we can also see that I've started to look at the inspirations behind the idea of my assignment construction. The sketchbook follows the journey, which is very, very, very important. And again, I am a great believer of that. Your sketchbooks, you can use at a later date for refinement. What I also did was I wanted to put the samples in a form of a context, and so I'd started to research fashion illustration with scaled elements of simple line drawings to demonstrate how the samples could possibly work. Also, there was a combination of some imagery to also make other connections for the samples to be in context. Now, on reflection, I do quite like this sketchbook because it does show a journey with the photographic evidence, with drawings, with placements of a sample. This then started to develop into very much an editorial presentation, which for me would be ideal because I am a lover of fashion. And this then extended that I could actually make the final presentation a PowerPoint for an audience due to not feeling very confident in assignment writing, as I don't feel I'm particularly academic. So keeping a PowerPoint would be bullet pointed, and also as well with a presentation I could actually verbally talk to my audience and they would have a PowerPoint presentation as a reflection or in the form of a document. What I continued to do then was to progress on to producing samples. So I wanted to produce the feeling and the mood for the mood boards, and this integrated sample making, words, images, anything textural that can coincide with a mood board to maintain the theme of William Mitchell and the colour palettes and stitch work for Paul Smith, as the initial idea of construction came from the winter coat. Also, what gave me another learning outcome was to maintain and use the simple imagery editing of photographic work. And as we can see here, some of the outcomes did produce new samples, which were personally I consider to be quite impressive. As part of the development, I decided to make my presentation black and white as a colour format, because then this refines the idea of concrete, which related to William Mitchell's concrete support walls, but also maintained the stitch work and three-dimensional aspect of the Paul Smith coat. Now, moving on, I produced for the final presentation. The final presentation came together towards the end of the assignment as a package, and this here I put together a slideshow, and this contains lots of digital imagery, as we can see here, the William Mitchell concrete support walls. There was also paragraph writing as an introduction. The presentation initially then developed into for a design company, for the idea of my client was looking for a bespoke product. And as we can see here, the way that I'd incorporated was from my independent project, samples of the three-dimensional aspects, stitch work, which came from the Paul Smith coat, and then this eventually turned into my final samples, which, as we can see here in a photograph, progressed through the refinement stage, and then this produced a textile sample for context. Alongside this presentation, I started to produce a little mini project which came from the idea of my tutor, and I just here collated lots and lots of imagery which I really enjoyed, because I had started to get to grips with little simple photographs and editing of these images. And I also produced another file for the refinement ideas for mood boards. And we can see that this is just a collection of my samples. Again, playing with digital photography to produce some editorial pieces for the idea of construction. Now, moving on, I put my final samples together in a box, and as we can see, the final outcomes of the samples were very simple, very three-dimensional, and again I felt that the samples related very well to the idea of construction of the coat by Paul Smith, and using just the white three-dimensional painted samples reflected concrete, which came from the theme of William Mitchell.